Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Rich Sabin, and I'll be your moderator. I work on the marketing team here at netElastic, and I'm excited to be hosting this session. We go to the next slide. Our presenters today include John Williams from Irwin Utilities, Tom Mitchell from netElastic, and Joe Beimel from KGP Co. In looking at the agenda, John Williams will share the broadband story at Irwin Utilities. Tom will give a brief overview of netElastic and our virtual broadband network gateway solution. And then Joe will discuss how KGP Co can help electric utilities put this all together with their integration expertise. And again, we'll finish with a Q&A session at the end. Now, before I hand the mic over to John, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. First, today's webinar will be available on demand, and we'll be sending a link to the recorded webinar to all attendees. Next, we'd love to hear from you today during the presentation. So if you have a question for any of our speakers, please click on the chat icon at the bottom of the screen and then enter your question. Again, we'll be answering all questions at the end of the session. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, John Williams. John is the individual who actually designed, implemented, and now manages Irwin Fiber. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Irwin Fiber is Irwin Utilities' fiber to the home broadband department. So, without any further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming John Williams. John, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Rich. I'll try to get my screen shared here real quick. All right. Does it look okay? Can you see that first slide of mine?
Looks good.
Okay, good deal. Well, hey, my name's John Williams, and thanks for having me. Just going to kind of tell a story of how Irwin Utilities started our broadband project back about 5 years ago. Of course, Irwin Utilities is a TVA distributor, and we actually came to life in 1945. And in 1962, we also started doing water and wastewater. So we've had a long history of doing multiple different services. And we've also had a pretty long history of looking at broadband services. So there's a couple case studies, one at the end of the 90s and at the beginning of the 2000s, based on just some data from customers. They wanted, at the time, they really wanted cable TV. And really wanted to just kind of point out on this, the price projections that we had. So about $20 million. And these were both projects that where we kind of, or where we were planning on doing cable TV as well, but really needed a 50% market share to be able to get that. And then in 2009, there were some stimulus funds, and we actually really thought there was a good chance of getting those. And in Tennessee, anyway, it looks like most of those funds went to Chattanooga EPB. But that project, we did a case study and figured it was going to be close to $24 million. Half of that we were hoping to be paid for by the grant. But anyway, that never came to be. So in 2012, I guess is really when we got started, and that's when I started at Irwin Utilities. I originally started my career at another utility right down the road, Bristol, Tennessee Electric System, in 2004. And I just graduated college and went to school in engineering, and Bristol, Tennessee started their fiber project in 2005. So I got to be there from the very beginning and kind of got to see, you know, what worked, what didn't work. You know, we definitely did do the full-blown project all at once. So we built a cable TV head end, and when you do that, you really need to build the whole system at once because you've spent a lot of money just to get that first customer. So after that, I went on and went to grad school in some computer science, and actually worked as a sales engineer for a while for Alcatel, and did a couple other things. And then in 2012, Lee Brown my boss contacted me and said, hey, you want to help us come build some fiber? And so we built a fiber ring for our backbone communications, upgraded our SCADA system, and also connected all the schools in the county together. And that took a few years. And in 2014, we kind of came up with a plan of how to do fiber to the home. And then in 2015 is when we served our first customer. And so kind of wanted to talk about how we got into it, and really wanted to frame everything around a book that I read that I found really useful. It's called Rework. There's a picture of it there. I actually discovered it after we started, but I think it's got a lot of good lessons, and it kind of goes along with our thinking, and I refer to it a lot, and just kind of help us keep on track of what we believe and what we do. But really, the whole idea came about from some thoughts of mine on how to implement it. And so, my wife and I, we joke sometimes that she gets excited when she comes up with a new idea, and I get excited about something when I figure out how to do it. An idea doesn't mean anything to me unless I have a good frame to implement it in. So really, we did that, or my how-to idea was kind of based around three different things. And one was the outside plant, how were we going to design it and make it work. So I had some good thoughts on that, just kind of based on operations that I saw at Bristol. A big project that I worked on in grad school was a web-based system that we built. And I really wanted to use something like that to do our workflow and management. So everything from like taking orders and completing them, just kind of the day-to-day, how do we manage what we do? And then finally, didn't want to do cable TV of any sort, so in 2014, 2015, it was a little bit harder to say, hey, everything is going to be streaming. Sling TV hadn't even come out yet. So that was a little bit harder of a sell, but it made it easier, because if you don't do cable TV, you really don't need to spend a lot of money to get started on customer one. So basically our plan was, let's build this in phases, and we'll do a pilot phase. And so the hedge in our bets was, well, if it completely failed, we haven't bankrupt the electric system, so we could just kind of mothball it if worse came to worse. So it kind of gave us a lot of leeway to get started. But really, it also gave us a lot of opportunity to do things the right way and take our time. So, all that we wanted to build our own, just completely data network. And so from Rework, we wanted to scratch our own itch, build something that we want. Me as a consumer, what would I want out of it? And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then, of course, definitely wanted to build our system for simplistic operations. So everything's kind of based around simplicity and using our own software to manage day-to-day stuff. And then, of course, we wanted to take advantage of our existing backbone that we'd already built and spend our money on things that last. So like the stuff out on the field on the poles. And another thing we really wanted to do was get away from using contractors as soon as possible. That's just kind of the Irwin Utilities way, and do everything ourselves if we can. And if we build things slow, we felt like we could. So next thing was we needed a plan. And so, of course, planning is really just guessing at what we thought that was going to be in the future. But at the bottom, the chart there, the EU column is us, and MUS is Morristown Utility System. So they're another utility down the road that started about 10 years before us, and they gave us their business plan and kind of helped us, figure out what we needed to do to get started. And so one thing I wanted to highlight was our projection of the system was, when we completed it, was a little over $9 million. So even with that stimulus project, our plan was going to be half of that cost. And it was really just by doing it slower and doing as much of it ourselves as possible. So we went through all the hoops to get the board, the city, the state comptroller, and TVA to approve everything. and came up with a funding strategy to do that. And basically what we came up with is, and Morristown Utilities did the same thing, was to take a loan, basically spin up a new department, and we call it the fiber department, which is kind of like a different company underneath Irwin Utilities. And we took a loan of $200,000 from the electric system. And so the premise was the electric system would basically own everything. They would own the assets, and the fiber department would lease those assets. And the benefit of that is the at the beginning, you don't have any money coming in. So that way the fiber department didn't really have to borrow a bunch. And basically all the revenue that they're getting in is going back into the electric system. And so in the long term, it's going to be a good cash cow for the electric system, because all that money is basically just flowing through us. But then on the front end, the fiber department doesn't need to borrow a lot. And so TVA is involved in that because we borrowed money from the electric system, so they have to control that. And that's actually all the money we ever needed to borrow. So after, we thought we were going to have to do maybe 2 or 3 more loans, but in the end, we got close, but we were able to get enough customers and get enough revenue coming in to where we've surpassed that, and we kind of haven't looked back since. But as part of that, we'd already kind of made our plans and everything, and they said, well, you need to do a survey to at least see if your customers think they want this. We built it all around how to do everything. And so we had done a couple surveys in 2000, 2010. And in 2014, we actually just hired a couple of summer helpers, and they went door to door in that first area that we were going to build, and talked to about 25% of the people there. And basically got to see a really good trend. And we gave all this to TVA that, pretty much everybody uses the internet now. And most of them said they would consider switching. So, we'd gone through all the process to get everything. We were getting ready to go. We had to, come up with what we were going to sell. So I like to think of this as kind of what we sell. I think there's a lot of parallels between us and the soup Nazi from the Seinfeld, the old Seinfeld episode, where he basically, they had a soup shop where they had the best soup in New York City. And so there was this huge line out the door. And if you came in there and didn't know what you wanted or were a problem, he would tell you to go away and never come back, or come back in a year or something. So, kind of, we just really firmly believed in, here's what we want. Here's what I want as a consumer. Simple packages. We got a slow speed 25 megs and a fast speed 1 gig. And then you can get phone with it if you want. And it makes it really easy to sell. And then people aren't upset about missing out on anything. So we give them everything they need. The router for Wi-Fi and everything's included. All the speeds are symmetric. But I think it really helps too, as it kind of gave us an identity. And some people come in and say, well, you really should have 100 meg speed in between those 2 speeds. And we're just like, well, no, that's not what we do. And we actually kind of joke. We came up with this saying, and it's at the bottom, idled. So if you don't like it, you can disconnect, basically, is what it means. So I think it's really helped the culture of the guys in the field to the guys in the office, and we can kind of rally together. So when a customer is bad to them, we rally behind them. It's like, no, this is what we do, and this is what we believe, and it's really helped to have a good team, a good group. So where we are today, we have a little over 3,000 customers. We think we'll have at least 3,500 by the end of the year. The fiber department's cash flow was positive in December 2016, so it didn't take very long. Our original business plan was to have 2,250 customers, and we surpassed that pretty quickly. We also got away from using contractors to build the system fairly quickly. So we broke the system into 7 phases, and the first 3 were built by contractors, and then the last 4 have been built by Irwin Utilities line crew. We also use contractors at the beginning to do installations, and only the first 250 of those were a contractor, and we started moving those all in-house in February 2016. And we're almost building past. We're almost done building past all of our customers. So 8,600 of 9,000 homes have been passed, and we've never had to do any advertising. We just word of mouth, and we put a few yard signs out, and honestly, for the whole 5 years we've been doing it, customers sign up faster than we can install them. And we achieved our 25% take rate in under 2 years, and actually we're over 43% take rate in that first section that we built. So what kind of worked for us? I think one thing that was a big win for us was using indoor ONT. So in 2015, 2014, indoor ONTs, I felt like were kind of like people were a little skeptical of running fiber inside the house, but it actually worked out really well. And it's basically half the cost of doing outdoor ONTs, and then we make our customers bring those back when they're done with the service, and if they don't, we bill them for it. So that's really worked out well. We spend a lot of time trying to drive our installation costs down as much as possible too. And we do that just by looking for just minor little pieces and parts that we can find to do things cheaper on the hardware side. But then we felt like we should spend more money on the actual guys that go and do the installation in the field. So like I said, we really worked hard to try to get enough steady business at the beginning to where we could hire our own full-time staff. And now we have 3 guys that basically do installations, and they're really technical and really good, and that's worked really well for us. Just having it leaves customers with a good taste in their mouth when our guys are done. We really focused on going after residential first. We heard a lot of people saying you should go after business first because they stay with you longer, and they're higher margin. But really, to me, businesses are tougher, so they take longer to install. They really don't do well if they have any issues. They can impact their business, and you really need to do like a survey before you hook them up to make sure that everything is you've got everything covered, because they're definitely more complex than a residential service. So that's kind of longer term. Hey, we'll go back and go after business services more later. But, for these first 5 years, just doing residential, we still do business, but we don't go after them at all. So if somebody calls in and wants stuff, we'll hook them up, but we try to take our time with it. And then building in phases, I think, was huge. It helped with cash flow, getting our processes in place, and just getting better. So we weren't throwing everything all at it at once. And I think that was a big help. Finally designing everything in-house has worked great. So all of our engineering from day one was done by us. And as we've grown, more and more of the guys are doing more and more stuff. And so that's worked out really well, and just keeping it as far as an operations perspective. So we may do something that costs a little bit more than a contractor would have done, but we're thinking about it in the long term. So initially it may cost a little bit more to put something where we did, but in the long term cost of ownership, we're kind of thinking of it that way. We also spent a lot of time on getting our processes and maps and operations and everything as refined as much as possible before we started. So like I said, we really tried to scratch our own itch on how do we want to manage our day-to-day operations. And so we just have a simple web-based application that we do use to manage everything, and I think that's really helped. And as things go on, we're able to change it as we need. Keeping our packages simple was super helpful as far as customer service that we already had. It was easier to teach them what to do, and it makes it easier for them to be on the phone with the customer. There's just a lot less stuff to go through with a customer, and it helps them make a decision faster, I think, as well. And then finally, we have a really talented CFO, and he said, really what we should do when we first started this is do a budget projection based on monthly projections, so we can really find where our cash flow crunch might be. And so we built that, had graphs of where everything we thought would be projected, and then every month that went along, we would punch in the real numbers, and it would recalculate into the future. And that, especially the first couple of years, was huge. It really helped us see where we were going, and it turned out to be really accurate. And we were able to satisfy all of our costs and everything perfectly from that. So compared to who we talked to before, they said they would do the projections based on a yearly thing. So you might, at the beginning of the year and the end of the year might look good, but you might have a deficit somewhere in the middle. So that really helped with that. And then finally, we just are a small group. So that picture up there is all of us. That's the inside and outside guys, and the only contractors that we use now are just running our drops. So we kind of have that focus of, really we're kind of to the end now, and really this is probably about as busy as we will be. And if you keep things small and simple, I think in the long run, it helps us have a more sustainable business. And with that, that's all I've got. So I'll kick it back over to you, Rich.
All right, thank you, John. That was excellent. Very, very informative. I'd like to now turn it over to Tom Mitchell. Tom is our VP of Channel Sales here at netElastic. Tom?
All right. And let's pick that. Share. Excellent. Well, thanks, John. That was a great overview of your journey. It's really good to hear the customer perspective, at least from netElastic's position, and what things you had to go through to build your business. So thank you for sharing with us. Now let's look real briefly at netElastic's virtual broadband gateway. The broadband gateway is a very small piece of a service provider's environment, but it's a very crucial piece of the service provider's environment. So we'll take a look at what we have to offer today. Let's see, advance, please. There we go. So what is a BNG? Give me a moment here. Okay, a BNG is an access router with built-in subscriber management services. It's typically the last router in a service provider's network, and it connects up to the layer 2 part of the network and aggregates the layer 2 traffic onto the main part of the network. Lastly, it routes to the core or to the peers and or to the internet. And that's what a BNG fundamentally does. Virtualization is the key to netElastic's BNG, and that's why it's a VBNG. So the benefits of virtualization, well, virtualization abstracts applications from the underlying hardware. So this drives reduced costs by leveraging high volume silicon and makes vendor selection a software decision versus a very large, expensive hardware decision. Virtualization enables agility by allowing for much faster provisioning of services, often just a mouse click, and allows workloads to be moved wherever they belong. Lastly, virtualization enables ultimate scalability by allowing one to allocate resources and decide on just how much of one thing over another. For example, a DSL provider can choose to allocate more resources to a control plane, while a fiber ISP can allocate more to the data plane. Really, it's your decision, and virtualization makes it a really easy decision to make and to change and to kind of migrate your business. netElastic's virtual BNG runs on Intel Xeon servers and delivers performance forwarding up to 300 gigs up on a 1 or 2 RU server. It performs the essential BNG functions that allow you to aggregate layer 2 traffic, authenticate and manage users, and provide hierarchical QoS to assure the best performance in situations of congestion. It's available as software or as an appliance, and we support basically a couple of integrated appliances, so you can decide for yourself on ports, sockets, depth of chassis, other characteristics, and you can deploy other services on that server provided the system resources are all available. The netElastic VBNG is an ideal alternative to the ASR 1000, Juniper MX series, or even the Nokia 7750, all very popular service provider BNGs. The ASR 1000 is a very popular BNG in those environments. As you can see, the netElastic BNG 1202 offers more subscribers, better performance, built-in CGNAT, and much more for both lower upfront costs and lower ongoing costs. So it's a real value play for service providers looking to build out networks. Another value proposition is the ability to do segmentation. Moving from a monolithic and centralized legacy structure to a virtualized central office gives a lot of advantages to service providers, but it also allows them to move to a distributed network edge strategy so they can deliver IP services closer to their end users. This means higher performance and lower latency. It means local content caching to reduce network strain. And it creates smaller fault domains and smaller attack surfaces so you can have a more resilient network overall. This allows the service provider to make precision investments to improve their business economically without high capex. Another value proposition is our robust network management. We offer a Cisco-like CLI emulation, which is very important because it's familiar to many skilled network engineers. We also provide a NetConf interface for programmable systems. But our BNG Manager is a powerful GUI that allows you to view all of the BNGs on your network. You can drill down to an individual BNG or an individual interface at a subscriber. You can even put complaining subscribers on watch to see how their network performs over time, learn if you have a network issue, or help them identify problems of their own. This is really handy for wireless access networks. So in summary, compared to traditional access routers, netElastic's VBNG runs on inexpensive commodity x86 servers. This means lower upfront costs, ongoing flexibility and scalability, and much lower operating costs. netElastic's BNG software is built on our industry-leading router code, which allows granular scaling of both the control and data planes. This means that broadband service providers can start as small as they like and grow with their subscriber base and their bandwidth needs. And compared to other virtual BNGs, we support multiple high availability modes. We have a single C control plane virtual machine that can support up to 128,000 subscribers. That's per chassis, so that's a large number of subscribers. We can support up to 360 gigabits in 1 or 2 RU form factors. And we can also do all your CGNAT on box and handle up to 4 million CGNAT sessions. So thanks for your time. Please reach out if we can do an in-depth technical presentation for you and your team. And I will hand things back to Rich, and thank you very much.
All righty, thank you, Tom. That was very good. I'd now like to introduce Joe Bimo from KGP Co. And given that we're following up on Tom's presentation on netElastic, KGP Co. is a premier netElastic integrator. So Joe, the floor is yours.
All right, can you guys give me, there we go. I'm just getting ready to share. All right, hopefully you can see my screen. I apologize, we have a storm here in Virginia and I lost internet connectivity. So if you see me on there twice, I had to think outside the box there for a minute. So real quick, just a little bit about KGP. We have been in business since the early 70s, 45 years, family-owned business. Mom is the chairman of the company. We've been blessed with growth, very rapid growth over that period of time as well. Our focus is in our electric co-ops, utilities, tier 1, 2, and 3 service providers, so wireline and wireless, and the MSO space. We're very much focused as a disruptor, and we'll talk a bit about that. Spent a lot of time in a disaggregated and virtualized technology space. Obviously, we're getting very much involved in what's happening with regard to 5G and the evolution on O-RAN, among other things. But that is a key area for us. We have a wide variety of capabilities from supply chain through network service and system integration. I'll spend some time and talk a bit about that as well. So where do we live and breathe? So from a KGP standpoint, we stretch across really an operator or a utilities ecosystem, whether we live in their core, at their edge, the far edge, or even at the enterprise side of the business. And lots of different solutions reside across that space. And it could be CPE solutions, Resi gateways, and IoTs at the enterprise. And we're working obviously on the BNG space, routers, muxes, MEC type devices at the far edge, and working on applications that really, when you think of technical spaces, could be AGs, could be POPs, MITSOs, COs, head ends, any number of different areas and lots of different projects and capabilities we spend there. And in our core, as operators are moving from 10 to 100, 100 to 400, and even looking at virtualizing the core infrastructure, we spend a lot of time there. And we're seeing it being driven by lots of different use cases, demand for capacity at the edge, the advent of 5G for some. But it's given us the opportunity to grow substantially in this space, becoming one of the leading providers from a solution integration standpoint in our industry. So what's important to stitch these solutions together? A lot of things have to happen in parallel. We have a program we called One Touch. It's the KGP Co. One Touch solution set. And what that does, it's focused around operators that have a desire to deploy technology quickly and generate revenue rapidly, which I think for the most part is important to really everybody out there. But it comes along with the line of being able to work with our customers to support that design and architecture, that test and validation in the lab or in the field. Moving to an optimization perspective where we're going to move from the field into, or excuse me, from a lab into the field, kind of where the rubber hits the road. Work together with our customers and the vendor ecosystem to source that technology, integrate it and test it, and then take it out to the field and deploy that technology. Then once it's out there, support it. A lot of these are multi-vendor ecosystems. We'll have netElastic, we'll have an x86 Intel package platform. We're going to have cables and optics and lots of other things that'll be involved in that ecosystem. And we'll support that cradle to grave. And we've been doing this now for quite a long time. We've been involved in really what I would classify as a cloud ecosystem in probably about 13 years now, going back to when virtualization first started to find its way into the operators and even now into the utility space. This is an important piece. A lot of these things, to make that rapid deployment a reality, things have to happen in parallel. So site conditioning and preparation of a deployment happens a long time. Even looking at decommissioning those assets, we can clean up the work we've done as we've replaced legacy technology with our disaggregated and virtualized technology. So these edge services are very, very important to happen in parallel to meet that demand. And again, using our system, we've been able to go from, on average, for large deployments, 140 days down to about 24 days from the time we say go to the time we hand things back off to our customer. A little bit of a snapshot, again, we talked a bit about size and scale is important. So to make this thing a reality, we have a variety of integration centers that we'll leverage across the country. Our primaries are going to be in Texas and in Georgia and in Kansas. We also have Warsaw, Indiana, and Ontario, California we'll leverage as well. We have 1,000 folks that are throughout the U.S. in particular. They're out there servicing our customers. They live every day inside of our customers' technical spaces, whatever that may be. On average, if I look at the last calendar year, we had about 24,000 projects that we do with customers. So we've got scale. We can support the smallest project to the largest project for our customer base. And we want to leverage all the highly automated tools and process and program management functions that we have today. netElastic and Intel are actively a part of what we call our SIC, our Solution Innovation Center. This is where we bring brand new products. We may look at ideation, create a new thing, look at interoperability to existing infrastructure, test that out, and then take that into our integration center from a production standpoint and build and deploy that out to our customer base. The value, I think, for our standpoint, we want to link all these different things together as we talked about. Solution Innovation Center is important. I think as we introduce new technology, the most important piece is making it consumable for the folks in the operation side. Advanced engineering labs, CTO folks can embrace something new, but the folks that have to deal with it every day need to be able to consume it. So we want to spend some time and make sure we can make that happen. Managing that supply chain, that vendor ecosystem, blending that best of breed technology together, working in the integration center to automate that, and then making sure that we can handle the distribution, whether we are servicing a particular core network or working with our customers, enterprise customers. And again, I think that's important from a technical support standpoint, is being to have that one throat to choke. Is if there is an issue, they know where to call, where to come, and we can support them live and over the air, and if need be, go out and dispatch resource to go and support them in the field as well. Lots of different areas that we're touching. We really are looking forward to supporting our customers as they go through this evolution, from the core all the way out to the edge, and as we see this network and we see this technology continue to evolve. That's it for me, Rich. I will hand that back to you.
All right, thank you, Joe. That was excellent. It's now time for our question and answer session. So if you have a question for any of our speakers, John, Tom, or Joe, please click on the chat button at the bottom of the screen and type in your question. Now, during the presentation, we did have a question come in, and I believe this is for you, John. And that question is, what was your biggest surprise during the entire process of rolling out broadband to your electric utility customers?
One thing that really surprised me is this was kind of my first experience with doing a phased build out. And so that actually helped build up like a pent up demand. And so, of course, we would build these sections, and sometimes there was just like basically a hard line border. And there was one particular section where it was in a fairly dense part of town that it took us a while to kind of get over to it, just kind of based on how everything was laid out. And the demand that was built up over there was insane. And I remember when we opened that section up, it just like exploded, and we couldn't believe how many people signed up like instantly. And they'd basically been waiting for like 3 years. And, I remember even our lead tech, he was just like, it really works in our favor of doing this as a slower build out because it's like free advertising. And he's like, man, those people have been clamoring for it. And so they were really happy to see us when we actually came in and did the install. So that to me was probably the biggest surprise.
Great, thank you. Actually, John, another question just came in for you, and this individual asked, what was the backbone that you talked about during your presentation? Was it a SCADA network?
Yeah, so we had no fiber at all before I started, and my boss had decided to upgrade. We had an old SCADA system that was about half working and used some old phone lines, and we really wanted to automate a bunch of stuff. The water side needed a lot of work and a lot of controls revamped. So we did kind of a two project built in one, and we built a big fiber ring around the system that we later used to feed our fiber to the home network. So we reused those fibers for other things. And then we basically connected 45 sites for water, wastewater, and electric for communications. So we kind of did those two things in tandem.
Okay, good. Another question. Is the indoor Wi-Fi router Calyx 2?
Yep, so currently we're using the Calyx 844 router indoors, and we just kind of marry that with we actually do both GPON and AE, and so we're using the 716 ONTs for AE, and we're using 803s for GPON. And we actually take a piece of like a Velcro sticker, and we Velcro the two boxes together, and that's just kind of like a lesson learned. We're trying to keep all that stuff together because customers get confused why they have two boxes and stuff. But yeah, they work great, and we use the cloud services they have, and actually integrated the API for the 844, and we use a third-party help desk, and they take the calls and can query the routers and see the devices connected to them, and it's a really good troubleshooting tool. So yeah, we're really happy with Calyx overall.
Okay, your presentation actually resonated with a lot of people because we have another question, two new questions that came in. One, as you see the market path to 5G, what do you see are the next major challenges, and where are the key problems and innovation that's going to be needed going forward? So it's a lot there, but as you see the market path to 5G, what do you see as the next major challenges and key problems, and what innovation do you think will be needed moving forward?
Yeah, so I guess, currently we have essentially two competitors, which is Comcast and CenturyLink. And, CenturyLink just really, with their DSL, they just really can't supply the speed. So we get a lot of those people. And then Comcast, we've been getting a lot, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, of cord cutters. So the price just keeps going up. And, you know, we're getting a lot of people that really aren't interested in switching other than the fact of saving money. So, you know, we don't pull any weird tricks on them and deals or all that stuff. We're just cheaper. And, you know, I think as time goes on, CenturyLink essentially will fall off as a competitor altogether. But, you know, I could definitely see like a 5G service that you could sign up for. And, you know, maybe they put a little box on the side of your house and run a router or something inside, and you can bundle that in with your cell phones. But we're in a mountainous area that we actually don't even have cell phone coverage for a decent part of our service footprint. So we haven't seen any of this yet, but, you know, kind of my thought is eventually when 5G comes here, they will need fiber. So we could essentially maybe even lease some of what we've got to them. But two, I think it'll be hard for them to compete on price. You know, we'll be able to be, you know, our system will be paid for at that point. And for us to do a drop and the equipment costs, I think will probably be cheaper than a 5G setup. You know, and something else we've just kind of kicked around is we've actually got a really talented phone engineer, and we've even thought about doing like a wholesale of cell service, so we could maybe potentially bundle your cell phone in with our service, because I think that'll be a good reason for people to use 5G. You know, you might have your cell phone and your 5G, and it'll all be under one bill. So those are kind of some things we're thinking about. But honestly, really over the last 5 years, we've just been focused on building the network because we've had so many customers without, you know, we're getting customers without any effort. Eventually that'll change, but I think we've got a good system, and we've got a lot of fiber that we can utilize for other things when the time comes.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, getting customers without any effort, that sounds pretty good to me. Another question for you, John. If you had to do it all over again, is there anything you would do differently? Anything you would focus more on or focus less on?
You know, like I said, I think our plan really worked out good from the beginning. I guess probably the biggest thing to me would be take advantage of some newer technology. You know, 2015 was only 5 years ago, but systems like netElastic, for example, you know, a software-based BNG is a great idea. And we're actually kind of, there's not really anything out there yet, but, you know, something similar for VoIP service. And, you know, it makes me think of the quote from Mark Andreessen, who's he was one of the founders of Netscape. He said that software is eating the world. And, you know, I think there's just so much room to virtualize so much of what we do. And especially for small companies like us, there's just, I think that gives you a lot of advantages and be able to compete where with the big companies, you know, that are able to buy these expensive systems and scale it over thousands and thousands of customers. We just don't have that. But if you can do it with software cheaply, I think that's, you know, that's kind of where we're moving to, and I think that would be totally something to jump on board with if you're getting started now.
Yeah, that's great advice. Virtualization has never been more important than it is right now, so very timely advice. Okay, if there's any other questions, again, please send them in. I know we've had a lot of questions for you so far, John. At this point, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So in closing, I want to thank all of our presenters, John, Tom, and Joe. And most importantly, I want to thank all of our attendees, you, for spending your valuable time with us today. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending an email to all of you with a link to this presentation. So once again, thanks for attending, and have a great day.
Thank you, Rich.
Take care. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.